Remember when you first brought your boyfriend or girlfriend home to visit the family? If your family's like mine, there were some members of that broader family group who you didn't want your girlfriend or boyfriend to meet on the very first time they were introduced to the family. You wanted to give them a chance to kind of decide that most of you were mostly normal before you introduced them to the one or two who were really kind of the outliers in the group, the difficult ones, the weird ones, the ones who you love and you accept, but you know are kind of odd. Today's gospel lesson is one of those outliers, one of those oddballs, one that never occurs in the lectionary, one that we don't show to strangers too often. And there's a reason for that. But first let me read it to you. This is from Matthew chapter 17. When they reached Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter, and they said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" And he said, "Yes, he does." And when he came home, Jesus spoke of it first, asking, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take toll or tribute? From their children or from others?" Peter said, "From others." And Jesus said to him, "Then the children are free. However, so that we do not give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a coin. Take that and give it to them for you and me." So you can see already, this is not a typical Jesus story. Now, it's not that unusual that Jesus does something miraculous, but it is unique. That is, this is the only occasion in which Jesus does something miraculous that seems to be for his own benefit. And also, it's a very strange story. Go cast a hook into the sea, Peter, and the first fish you catch will have a shekel in its mouth, a coin. And you'll take that shekel, and that will pay our temple tax. Now, one of the reasons that scholars exceedingly doubt that this is an historical event in Jesus' life is not just the account of the fish with the coin in its mouth, not that in itself, not just that it's miraculous, but that it echoes so closely the miraculous stories that were contemporaneous to Jesus. That is, there were other wonder workers, there were other miracle men in Jesus' day. Most of them were magicians and frauds and were trying to scam people, just like, well, I don't mean that entertaining magicians are scammers, but they are deceivers. And we're enjoying their deception, but they're not actually doing miracles. And neither were most of the first century wonder workers that we read about in literature outside of Scripture. And this is the only place where you really find Jesus looking like one of those first century wonder workers. And so we don't bring this story out in public. We don't show it to those who aren't part of the family very often, because it's embarrassing. And it's outside of the normal range of what we expect from Jesus' miracles. And I wouldn't bother talking with you about it, except that the point that it gets to is not an inconsiderable point. The temple tax collectors, and there really were such people, collected a shekel, a half shekel actually, from each man in Israel. It was voluntary. There's no compulsion to this. And some religious groups did not pay the temple tax because they objected to the corrupt administration of the temple. Jesus himself objected to the corrupt administration of the temple. When he criticizes the chief priests and scribes, what he's saying is, you guys running the big church there in Jerusalem, you are not doing it well. But Jesus, despite his criticism of the temple, in fact does pay the temple tax. But that conversation he has with Peter is what I want you to pay attention to. Jesus says to Peter, do the children of kings pay a toll, pay a tax, or does he collect it from strangers? And Peter says, quite obviously and rightly, kings don't tax their own family. It would be like reaching into their own pocket to pay tax. They only collect tax from those outside of the family. And Jesus says, therefore the children are free. Nevertheless, let's have this miraculous means whereby we can pay our temple tax so that we don't give offense to those who are in the temple. And what Jesus is saying with this little elliptical conversation is that he, Jesus, being the Son of the living God, doesn't owe a temple tax. His Father is the king, and why would the king's son pay a tax to worship in the temple? Okay, we get that. But the crucial thing is that Jesus says this miraculously provided coin is going to pay the tax for both of us. And what that means is that because Peter is related to Jesus, he, like Jesus, is a child of the king. And he is not some stranger who has to pay a temple tax. But he, like Jesus, is the Son of the living God. And so, my brothers and sisters, are we. Because we're related to Jesus, we are children of the King. And we owe no tax, no price. We're loved and admitted into the close relationship with God for free. Because Christ has made us one with him. And that's good news, even in a story that maybe we don't love so much.